Hi guys, I hope you guys are having a great night. Tonight I have Tucker Carlson podcast where he interviews Julian Assange's wife. Her name is Stella Assange. So, as we know, everyone has been talking about for years now that Assange needs to be released because he's a journalist who never committed a crime. He just exposed corruption. What is that corruption, you ask? If you haven't heard, it is multiple topics. First being Hillary Clinton's emails, which exposes the corruption. And I don't really want to go through that on YouTube, but you can easily find it if you have Twitter, or sure, there's some YouTube articles, but that would take quite some time to explain. Also, the John Podesta emails, which are disgusting and pretty much also exposed that our elections are rigged. Well, hopefully, YouTube doesn't get mad. That elections have issues and are controlled around the world. He did expose that. And also, he was the one that originally opened up the conversations for Pizzagate. If you guys recall, the conspiracy that actually ended up being really true and still is happening, I would suggest to look it up on YouTube or Twitter, or you probably can find it on Facebook, maybe. But yeah, Pizza Gate. It will blow your mind. All right, so I believe that Trump should have pardoned him. I know he didn't, and I believe this time around he will. He needs to because he has zero charges and has been held for, I believe, 6 years. And Trump knows exactly how that feels like getting charged for doing nothing wrong. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe. Let's get the video started.
Has been locked away in one place or another for more than a decade. Julian Assange is so despised by elements within the permanent U.S. government that at one point, CIA Director Mike Pompeo discussed murdering him in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he was seeking asylum. Mike Pompeo has never been charged for that, which is a crime. Unelected bureaucrats can't just murder people they don't like. And he probably never will be charged with a crime. Virtually the entire ruling class in Washington is opposed to Julian Assange. And that's the reason that he has sat for years now in Belmarsh prison in London. Keep in mind, Julian Assange has not been charged with a crime in Great Britain, and yet he's being held there. So this fall, we went to Belmarsh and we asked Julian Assange, why do you think you're being held as the most wanted man in America without ever being charged with a real crime? Here's what he told us. We talked about why he is in prison, and my first question to him was, what do you think this is actually about, since you haven't been accused of a crime? And he said something that really struck me, and I think, having spent my life in Washington, is absolutely right. He said he first became famous when WikiLeaks published documents and videos that the U.S. government had kept secret from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were gravely embarrassing to the Pentagon. But that wasn't the red line. The red line was several years later when WikiLeaks published information about surveillance by the CIA. And so I asked him directly, are you aware of anyone being harmed or killed on the basis of information that he published? He said, of course not. And he said it in a sincere way. Like, by the way, I think if people were killed because of his publishing, because of the stories that he put online, he would feel bad about it. I mean, he seems like a humane person. He withheld information about CIA because he didn't want to get people hurt. He famously published the contents of Hillary Clinton's email account. I asked him, when you published these emails, did you realize how powerful Hillary Clinton was? We had a conversation about that, and I said, looking back, do you regret doing it?
If you guys haven't seen those emails, let me just tell you, there's videos of torturing children. There was in Podesta's. I've seen videos online of him around kids, like dressed in costumes. Them supposedly just doing very violent things to kids. And I don't want to tell exactly on here what it is, but you can find it on the web. It's insane.
That he goes, honestly, it was fun. You'll notice that Julian Assange was not in that clip. That was a recap of our conversation with Julian Assange. And the reason we did that was they wouldn't allow us to interview him on camera. So not only are they holding him, they hope until he dies, in a maximum security prison, but they're also preventing him from telling his own story to the world. All of this is a crime. Every person running for president of the United States should be forced to answer the question, will you pardon Julian Assange if he ever winds up on American soil? So far, no one has been forced to answer that question. We hope that will change. The woman you saw in the clip is Julian Assange's wife, Stella. She has been his greatest advocate in the free world, and she is now leading the effort to stop his extradition to the United States, where he would wind up in a supermax prison, never to be heard from again until he dies. She is a lawyer, a human rights activist, and we're honored to have her join us now. Stella Assange, thank you so much for coming on. Can you give us an update, because I know this is taking place right now, it's in progress currently, what the status of this extradition hearing is?
Well, look, we've just been in court for 2 days, and this decision could be the final one. We didn't know when we were coming into it yesterday whether we would have a decision today. And if the UK decides in favor of the US, then it will put Julian on a plane to the US. I mean, that is how imminent it is. So really, it's a very, very high risk moment for Julian. And what happened during these 2 days is that the two judges said that they would withhold their decision until, well, they haven't set a date, but at least a week. And so we don't know what will happen next. It remains the case that if he loses this round, then that's it in the UK. There's no further possibility for appeal. He can try to go to the European Court of Human Rights, but last year, only one application to the European Court of Human Rights to stop an extradition or deportation was granted out of 63 applications. So it's really just in extremely rare cases. Of course, we say this is one of them. This is one where there would be irreparable harm. And of course, the European Court of Human Rights should stop an extradition if the UK finds against him, but it's not a given. So Julian could be on US soil within a matter of weeks. That's still the case.
I'm confused by the role of the UK in this. As far as I understand, he's never been charged with a crime in the United Kingdom. And yet the UK government is holding a journalist without charging him. I mean, this is what we accuse Russia and Iran and North Korea of doing. Why are British politicians degrading their own system and their history on behalf of the United States government? I feel like I'm missing something here.
I can answer that for you because, as I said, he exposed Pizzagate, which involved Jeffrey Epstein and all the big clients. Those big clients also involve British leaders. That's all it can be, because if he's over there getting locked up over there and they don't have any charges for him and they weren't involved, they wouldn't be complying with the US. Just doesn't make sense. Doesn't pass the scratch test.
Well, this is the default state of affairs. The UK views itself as a lapdog. I mean, it was obvious in court at one point. One of the judges asked the US, "Well, if your argument is that if the Home Secretary sees that the US issued this extradition request." And that it's wrong on the face of it, that she wouldn't be able to do anything. And the US lawyers said, yeah, that's precisely right. It's completely lopsided. The US can do whatever it wants, basically. And that was part of their arguments in court. I mean, not to get too much into the weeds of the court proceedings, but basically what they were saying was, you have to take these statements of these prosecutors at face value. You don't want to offend the United States, our ally. You would be implying that the prosecutors were lying. And of course, that would never be the case. So they were trying to convince the court that they should just take it all at face value. And of course, inside the courtroom, it's like they're running two parallel cases. I mean, we're running the case, the true reality, which is that Julian's a journalist that exposed the wrongdoing of the country that's trying to extradite him. And the US is, just trying to attack Julian with all sorts of nonsense. The UK is a willing participant. Of course, his imprisonment has gone for so long. He's been in Belmarsh High Security Prison for almost 5 years, but before that in the embassy in the Ecuadorian embassy in the heart of London. And during this time, when he was in the embassy, it was surrounded by British police. They were spending something like millions and millions, I think it was £5 million a year, on surrounding the embassy, and he was not charged with a crime at the time. It was a show of force, and of course, it was a show of force on behalf, by this British police, but to show the United States that they were, that they were showing their allegiance, basically.
Didn't I just say that they were showing they're complicit? That they were actually on their team, and I guarantee, because a lot of them were on the Epstein Island, which Assange was supposedly one of the people that exposed it, is what I'm getting at. But yeah, that's insane. He got too close to the truth, and if they can get him behind bars and do all this stuff to Trump, just think what they can do to us normal everyday Americans. So we need to make sure we tread slightly and we're smart when it comes to what we're doing and saying, including myself. That's one thing I need to work on myself big time.
And that's how we've had this lawlessness for over a decade, to hound Julian and to kind of send a signal. And his imprisonment in Belmarsh, is part of a game that they play, that the US says, well, the UK is keeping him. It's not really us. He's not on US soil. And the UK goes, well, it's not really us because this is a US extradition request and he's been there for almost 5 years. And so they play this game, and they, he's no one's responsibility. And it's just, it's a game that they've been playing for years and years.
Does it? I know you live there, but you follow American politics. Was it surprising to you that Mike Pompeo, the neocon former CIA director who plotted to murder your husband, who had not been charged with anything in the U.S. at that point, that he was allowed to continue to be prominent in the United States? He ran for president after that, and no one in the American media said anything about it, really, with a few exceptions. But no one even mentioned that. You tried to murder your husband. What did you think of that?
Well, I think the CIA is a rogue organization that everyone on every level of the U.S. Politics is terrified of, and they are trained to assassinate. They are trained to fabricate information and place it in the media and conduct propaganda warfare. And
my opinion of the CIA, real quick, is I believe they are the most corrupt three-letter agency in just any agency. They are the most corrupt. If you go to the history and these different programs they ran, example, Operation Paperclip, or just look up Operation Paperclip. Or I had like 5 on the top of my head, but there's a lot of missions they've ran in the past without letting the public know, which would usually be illegal spying on Americans without their consent, or some of the other things that they did. But Operation Paperclip, look that up. It will blow your mind. But yeah, the CIA, do not trust. Yeah, never trust them. They are the most corrupt.
To overthrow, governments and so on. And, not just abroad, it seems that there's a credible case that they've done so domestically too. I mean, looking at this objectively, you think, well, what on earth is this? There's a whole spiel about U.S. democracy and so on. And the CIA is an agency that has, caused all sorts of trouble for many countries around the world, but also domestically, they are a force for destabilization and compromise. And, Mike Pompeo's ability to...
Also, the CIA is very well known now. The truth's being exposed to go into other countries and install a puppet government. So if they don't like the leader, they will do an undercover mission and try to take out that leader and install a shadow leader that they accept or agree with. It's insane. And they've been doing it for decades, I would say, at least.
Move around Washington without consequence, I don't think is because of his I don't know, attractiveness to the Washington circles, but rather he's seen as a dangerous person. But he tried to run for president, and that didn't go very well. And he wrote a book, and no one bought it except for his PAC or whatever. So there's that. But yeah, he's a dangerous individual, and even within the CIA. I mean, we know this story about Julian and the murder plot because people within his organization said that
this audiobook on Amazon has made me over $20,000, and I didn't even make it myself.
He had lost the plot, that he had become obsessed with Julian, that he wanted to kill Julian, and that he was discussing it, in the White House and so on. So that means that there was, internal disagreement about his obsession, and that's a sign of hope. Of course, within these organizations, there's always different types of people with different levels of integrity and commitment to the Constitution and so on. And the fact that many of them then spoke to these investigative journalists and exposed the crazy Pompeo murder plot is, commendable, and I'm personally very, very thankful to them that they said something, not just because of the fact that we've been able to introduce it in court, but because it shows that it goes against, very basic rules of integrity, and that this obsession with Julian that Pompeo had is part of like a serious collapse even within the CIA that occurred during this time.
Yeah, he is a dangerous person.
And Pompeo was actually in the Trump organization, but as you guys know, I've admitted Trump didn't have the best people in his first administration, but that's not his fault. He was never a politician. He learned through the process, going through the process like we did. This time around, he knows who his loyal people are that he can trust. And Mike Pompeo, he needs to be locked up.
He should be in prison. And it's just striking that so few journalists ask him about that. None, so far as I know. So tell me, if your husband is extradited to the United States, what do you think there's any chance he'll receive a presidential pardon?
Any president who looks at this case and understands how it is a danger to the future of the U.S., not just the Constitution, but the political culture that there has been in the United States, that has been built on openness and a vibrant culture of opposition to centralized power.
Yes.
All of that will go out the window with this case. So any president who actually values these traditional constitutional protections should free Julian in whatever form that takes. If it's a pardon, then I welcome it. I don't care how he's freed. He just needs to be freed. The corruption and the lawlessness around Julian's case, it's politically motivated. It's rotten to the core. All of that is self-evident, and whatever happens, as long as Julian's free, everything else is secondary as far as I'm concerned.
And
all right, guys, that's about it right there. But I've actually really wanted to see him interview Assange. It doesn't look like they're going to let him. Let's keep him and his family in our prayers. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great night. Like, comment, subscribe. Talk to you guys soon.